Today, I invite you to consider a simple but life-altering truth. The greatest revenge is realizing your worth so deeply, the past no longer fits you. There will come a day, often when you least expect it, when the one who took you for granted, the one who mistook your kindness for weakness, will look back and finally see what they lost. But this realization does not empower you. You empower you. Consciousness is the only reality. This statement, while simple, holds within it the key to transformation, healing, and the full expression of your inner power. It asserts that your outer world is not the cause but the effect of what you accept as true within. What you observe with your senses is not reality in itself. It is only the shadow of your inner assumptions, beliefs, and persistent thoughts. Consciousness is not a passive state. It is a dynamic, creative force. Everything you experience begins in the unseen world of awareness. It begins in the quiet place where you feel, imagine, and assume. There is no experience that does not first originate from this inner state. This means that your circumstances, relationships, and outcomes are not formed independently of you. They are not random. They are not even dictated by others. They are formed and shaped by the state of consciousness you occupy. If you accept the idea that you are unworthy, your world will reflect that belief, not because it is true, but because you have consciously or unconsciously accepted it as true. If you assume that you are invisible, unlovable, or replaceable, you will find people, situations, and outcomes that mirror that assumption. The power of consciousness lies in its creative nature. You are not merely observing life, you are generating it. Many people believe that they must change the world to feel better. They try to manipulate circumstances, convince others, beg for validation, or work endlessly to be seen. But all of that effort is backwards. You do not need to change the mirror. You need to change the image in front of it. Your consciousness, your inner state, is that image. When you embody the state of someone who knows their value, the world begins to respond to that version of you. Not because the world suddenly decided to treat you better, but because you finally decided to treat yourself as worthy within. Every experience is filtered through the state you dwell in. If you walk into a room believing you don't belong, your body language, tone, and energy will unconsciously communicate that belief. Others will react accordingly. But if you walk into the same room having assumed that you are welcome, powerful, and magnetic, you will see that same room reflects something very different back to you. The people may be the same. The place may not change, but your world will change because you have changed your state of consciousness. The most liberating realization is that you are not a victim of the world you see. You are its author. This is not about blame, it's about power. The power to shift, elevate, and create a life that matches the truth of who you are. You cannot live a life of abundance while holding a consciousness of lack. You cannot be loved fully while holding the inner assumption that love must be earned or chased. Whatever you hold within, you will see without. That is the law. This also means that healing does not require fixing the past, changing others, or waiting for someone to realize your worth. Healing requires shifting your consciousness, replacing the inner script that says you are not enough with the quiet, steady knowing that you are. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Consciousness is not just what you think, it's what you accept. It is the assumption that you allow to harden into belief and then into experience. The narcissist, the heartbreak, the rejection, these were never the source of your pain. The pain came from the inner agreement that their inability to value you somehow reflected the truth of your worth. But when you step back and recognize that their perception was only a mirror of your old state, you are free to change it. And as you do, your outer world must conform. Because consciousness is the only reality. Imagination creates reality. This truth, often dismissed as poetic or fanciful, is in fact one of the most powerful forces available to any human being. Imagination is not just a tool for daydreaming or escape, it is the blueprint of all that exists in your world. Every invention, every relationship, every circumstance, every moment of transformation or decline begins first as an inner image held in the mind. Before it was tangible, it was imagined. Before it was experienced, it was accepted as possible in thought. The world does not shape your inner life shapes the world. This truth becomes self-evident when you consider that everything man has ever created started with a thought. The buildings that surround you, the phone in your hand, the clothes you wear, the books you read, none of these things materialized without first existing in someone's imagination. The chair you sit on was once imagined in form and function before it ever took shape in wood or metal. But this creative principle does not apply only to objects or inventions. It governs the entirety of your personal reality. Your relationships, self-image, income, health, and opportunities are not formed outside your imagination but within it. Imagination is the womb of creation. It is the silent builder that takes your persistent thoughts and feelings and molds them into form. What you consistently imagine to be true, even without evidence, eventually becomes the very evidence you live by. You may not notice the process as it happens, but it is always at work. Each time you replay a negative scenario, assume failure, or or expect to be overlooked, you are imagining. And each time you visualize success, embody confidence, or expect to be loved, you are also imagining. The only difference is what kind of reality you are calling forth. What many do not realize is that the imagination does not wait for permission. It responds to attention. Whatever you give your inner focus to, especially with emotion, sets into motion the laws of creation. Most people live reactively, allowing their imagination to be shaped by fear, trauma, memory, or social conditioning. They imagine worst-case scenarios without even realizing it. They rehearse arguments that never happened, replay rejections that should be forgotten, and visualize themselves as victims of other people's choices. And then they are surprised when life reflects that back to them. But imagination can be reclaimed. It can be used deliberately. You can decide today to imagine yourself as loved, empowered, chosen, and successful, not because you see the evidence of it, but because you choose to create the evidence of it. Imagination is the seed. Life is the harvest. If you want different results, you must plant different seeds. The beauty of this is that no one else needs to change for you to change your reality. You can begin now, in the quiet, in the unseen. When you imagine the best version of yourself, and you do it often enough that it feels natural, life will rise to meet that image. People will begin to treat you differently. Opportunities will appear. Your mood will shift. You will carry yourself in a new way. It will seem miraculous to others, but to you it will feel like the inevitable result of what you have always seen within. And that is the power of imagination. It does not beg for reality. It creates it, not with force or control, but with inner conviction. Imagination allows you to rise above what is and call forth what could be. It is not bound by your past or your present. It is not subject to logic, limitation, or likelihood. It is infinite. The more real you allow your inner vision to become, the faster your external world will conform to it. This is not fantasy, it is law. The world may appear fixed, but it is always moving in response to what you believe and imagine to be true. And when you persist in the image of the life you desire, not occasionally but consistently, reality has no choice but to rearrange itself to match it. Because imagination creates reality. The law of assumption is one of the most profound yet often overlooked truths governing human experience. It states that whatever you assume to be true, consistently and with conviction, becomes your reality. Assumptions are not idle thoughts or fleeting wishes. They are the deep, often subconscious beliefs you carry about yourself, others, and the world. They operate like programs running in the background of your life, quietly shaping your decisions, your reactions, and the way others treat you. While people often look to outside circumstances to define their possibilities, the law of assumption teaches that your inner state is the cause, and your outer world is only the effect. You do not get what you want. You get what you assume. This is a crucial distinction. Wanting implies lack. Assumption implies possession. When you assume something is already yours, your mind, emotions, and behaviors begin to align with that truth, even before there is visible evidence. And in time, your world catches up. Life begins to reflect back to you the version of yourself you have chosen to believe in. Not because it suddenly changed, but because you did. You do not have to force circumstances or convince others. You only need to persist in the assumption until it becomes natural. This law is always at work, whether you use it consciously or not. Most people assume lack, rejection, limitation, and disappointment, not because they want these things, but because they have become so familiar with them. They replay old stories and call them truth. They identify with their wounds and expect history to repeat itself. But the law does not discriminate between positive and negative assumptions. It simply reflects what you believe to be true. If you assume that people can't be trusted, you will encounter betrayal. If you assume love is hard, it will feel out of reach. If you assume you are not enough, the world will echo that belief in 1,000 subtle ways. But when you become aware of the law of assumption, you gain the power to rewrite the story. You realize that you are not at the mercy of the past or of external approval. You can begin to assume new truths, new identities, and new outcomes. You can assume that you are already successful, that you are already loved, that you are already whole. And as you hold these assumptions with feeling and persistence, the world will bend to accommodate them. This is not delusion. This is creation. It is important to understand that assumption is not mere positive thinking. It is not saying something nice and hoping it sticks. It is the quiet, unshakable inner knowing that what you have claimed for yourself is real now, even if it has not yet appeared in form. It is a discipline of the mind, a shifting of identity, a change in the way you see yourself and your place in the world. When you live from the end, from the assumption that your desire is fulfilled, you think, feel, and act in alignment with that version of you. And the world in response reorganizes itself to reflect that version. This process does not require effort in the traditional sense. It requires faith, repetition, and willingness to let go of the old. You must give up the need to analyze, to control, and to doubt. You must become loyal to the unseen. You must remain faithful to the assumption, even in the face of contradiction. Because reality always lags behind consciousness. What you see today is only the result of what you assumed yesterday. But what you assume now creates what is coming next. This is the key. This is the door. Everything you seek is already yours, if you dare to assume it. Detachment from the old self is one of the most powerful steps in personal transformation, yet it is often the most resisted. This resistance comes not because the old self is desirable, but because it is familiar. The mind clings to what it knows, even if what it knows causes pain, limitation, or stagnation. The old self is not just a version of you from the past. It is a collection of assumptions, emotional patterns, reactions, and identities that you have worn for so long they feel like truth. But in reality, they are only habits, and habits can be changed. Detaching from the old self means no longer feeding the story that has kept you bound. It is the deliberate act of breaking agreement with who you once believed yourself to be in order to step fully into who you are becoming. This detachment is not rejection or shame. It is not about condemning your past self or erasing your history. It is about acknowledging that your past no longer defines you. It is about honoring the role that version of you played while gently releasing it. The old self may have believed in scarcity, feared rejection, chased validation, or expected betrayal. The old self may have needed others to see them in order to feel worthy, but those beliefs are no longer required. They were survival tools, not truths. And now you are being called to evolve beyond them. Letting go of the old self is an inner decision. It begins when you stop identifying with the thoughts, emotions, and triggers that kept you small. When you recognize a familiar reaction and say, "This is no longer who I choose to be," you create a moment of freedom. In that space, you have the power to respond as your new self. Not the self shaped by wounds, but the self shaped by vision. This shift is subtle, yet profound. It's not always marked by external change right away. In fact, life may continue to reflect the old story for a time, but your job is to remain loyal to the new identity. Even when it feels unfamiliar, even when evidence is slow to appear, detachment from the old self often comes with discomfort. There may be a sense of loss or confusion, as if you are stepping into a space between who you were and who you are becoming. This is the void, the fertile ground where creation takes place. Many retreat during this phase, fearing that nothing is happening. But this is the time to hold steady. The absence of the old does not mean the new is not forming. It is forming beneath the surface, shaped by your continued assumption of the new identity. This is where trust becomes essential. Trust that what you no longer entertain internally will eventually cease to appear externally. To detach is not to numb yourself or deny your feelings. It is to observe your reactions without giving them control. When the old self resurfaces, through anger, insecurity, or fear, you do not fight it, you witness it. You say, "I remember this version of me, but I no longer live there," and then you return to your chosen state. The more often you do this, the weaker the grip of the old becomes. Eventually it fades, and what remains is the version of you that has always existed at a higher level, waiting for your permission to lead. Detachment from the old self is a declaration: I am no longer available for patterns that do not align with who I now claim to be. It is the realization that you do not need to prove your growth to anyone. Your energy speaks for itself. Your life begins to reflect the change not because you forced it, but because you became it. And in becoming it, you allow the past to dissolve, not as a loss, but as a necessary release. You cannot carry the old self into a new reality. The door opens only when you decide to leave behind who you no longer are. The boomerang of awareness is a concept rooted in the understanding that what you project inwardly always returns to you outwardly. Your awareness, what you habitually think, feel, and assume, is never neutral. It is a silent message sent into the unseen, and that message always finds its way back in form, like a boomerang that returns to the hand that threw it. Your awareness, when focused consistently on a particular state or belief, must return to you as a mirrored experience. This is not philosophy or wishful thinking. It is a principle, a law as dependable as gravity. Whatever you are conscious of being, whether in hope or in fear, becomes the world that surrounds you. Life does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are aware of being. This means you are never a victim of other people's perceptions, choices, or neglect. You are only ever experiencing the outpicturing of your own awareness. If you constantly assume you are not valued, that assumption becomes a filter through which others behave. If you believe deeply that you are chosen, loved, and worthy, people and circumstances begin to reflect that back to you, even those who once treated you otherwise. This is the boomerang at work. Your inner state is cast out like a signal, and life responds to match it, not as punishment or reward, but as reflection. The most compelling evidence of this principle often shows itself in moments of detachment. When you finally stop seeking validation, when you stop replaying old hurts and start affirming your worth without conditions, it often triggers unexpected shifts. People return, apologies appear, recognition surfaces. It is not because you needed it, but because you no longer did. When the need dissolves and self-assurance takes its place, the external begins to catch up with the new inner truth. This is not magic, it is law. The outer follows the inner. This is especially true in relationships. When you stop identifying with the version of you that needed to be seen or chosen, and instead begin to live from the knowing that you are already enough. Your awareness shifts. You are no longer trying to pull people into your life from a place of lack. You are inviting them in from a place of overflow. And if they cannot meet you there, they fade, not because you push them away, but because your new awareness no longer makes space for what is misaligned. Yet sometimes when those people do return, it is often with a different energy. They sense your change. They feel your new center of gravity. This is the boomerang, awareness coming full circle. It's important to understand that this return may not always come from the exact person or situation you focused on. The law doesn't bind itself to specific names or faces. It delivers what matches the feeling and belief you have sustained. If you have consistently assumed that love, respect, and abundance are yours, those experiences must return to you in some form. Whether through familiar people or new ones, whether through a path you expected or one you never imagined, it must come. The boomerang may fly in a wide arc, but it always returns to its origin. This awareness gives you immense power. You no longer need to force outcomes or manipulate situations. You only need to guide your awareness. Choose carefully what you dwell on. Observe where your inner conversations lead. Speak inwardly as the version of yourself who already has what you desire. Assume the end as if it were present now. Hold that state with consistency, and the world will echo it. This is not a matter of time, but of persistence. The moment your awareness becomes stable, the return begins. The boomerang is not delayed, it is directed. And when it returns, it will not be by chance, it will be by law. Revenge through elevation is the quiet, powerful act of choosing your growth over retaliation, your peace over chaos, and your evolution over validation. It is the decision to no longer match the energy that hurt you, but to rise so far beyond it that the past becomes irrelevant in comparison to what you've become. This form of revenge is not rooted in ego or spite. It is rooted in self-respect. It is a declaration that you will no longer allow those who tried to break you to define you. You do not need to prove your worth to them. You simply become someone so deeply in alignment with your truth that they are forced to confront the reflection of who they are not. When someone has underestimated you, betrayed you, abandoned you, or tried to keep you small, the natural urge may be to retaliate, to show them their error by wounding them back. But true revenge does not come from returning their actions. That only binds you to their level. Instead, it comes from detaching and transforming. When you elevate, you reclaim your power. You stop telling the story of what was done to you and start living the story of who you decided to become because of it. Elevation makes their actions irrelevant because you no longer seek closure from them. You give it to yourself. Elevation is not loud. It does not announce itself or beg to be seen. It moves in silence behind the scenes while the world catches up to the new version of you. You don't chase people to acknowledge your growth. Your energy will speak for itself. The people who once looked down on you may eventually look up in disbelief, not because you planned their regret, but because you focused entirely on your evolution. You stopped responding to the insults. You stopped replaying the past. You stopped trying to get them to see your value. And in doing so, you became untouchable. This kind of revenge comes through discipline. It requires letting go of the need to be right and embracing the desire to be free. It demands that you stop arguing for your limitations and begin assuming the version of yourself who already has what you used to chase. You invest in your growth not to impress them, but to express yourself more fully. You walk away from their chaos and step into clarity. You build, you heal, you rise, and slowly the things you once cried about lose their grip on you. What they thought was a loss becomes your liberation. What they thought would break you becomes the very reason you learn to stand taller. And while they may return, confused, apologetic, or unchanged, you no longer need their presence or absence to define your emotional state. Their recognition is irrelevant. Your new life is your proof. Your calm is your statement. Your glow is your reply. And when they finally see you, not just visually, but energetically, it is not because you sought them out. It is because you became undeniable. Revenge through elevation is not about showing them who you are. It's about remembering who you are and embodying it so consistently that the world, and anyone who once doubted you, cannot help but notice. You do not rise to be seen. You rise because staying small no longer fits. You do not heal for applause. You heal because the pain is no longer worth carrying. And in doing so, you win, not over them, but over the version of you that once believed they had the power to define your worth. That is true elevation. That is unshakable revenge. Self-concept as destiny is the recognition that who you believe yourself to be determines not just your inner life, but the entire landscape of your outer world. It is not what you desire that creates your future. It is what you are in your own mind. The self-concept is the invisible blueprint shaping every interaction, opportunity, and outcome. It is the silent author of your behavior, your choices, and the way life responds to you. You may say you want success, love, or freedom, but if your self-concept is rooted in lack, unworthiness, or fear, those desires remain distant because your inner identity does not align with the experience you seek. Reality always rises to meet who you assume you are. This is not about arrogance or surface-level confidence. It is about the deep, often unspoken beliefs you carry about your own value, your place in the world, and what you believe is possible for someone like you. A person with a self-concept of being overlooked will continue to feel invisible, no matter how loudly they try to be seen. A person with a self-concept of being unwanted will interpret even kindness through the lens of suspicion or inadequacy. On the other hand, someone who assumes they are worthy, chosen, and capable will navigate the world with a calm certainty that invites others to reflect that belief back to them. This is not coincidence, it is law. Every self-concept contains within it an assumption, a silent agreement you've made about what life is and what it will continue to be. These assumptions, when left unexamined, become self-fulfilling prophecies. If you assume people don't respect you, you will carry yourself in ways that almost guarantee that outcome. If you assume that abundance is hard to access, you'll unconsciously make choices that keep it far away. But the moment you choose a new self-concept, everything begins to change. Not because the world changes first, but because your inner world no longer makes room for the old story. Changing your self-concept is not about pretending or forcing. It is about remembering. You were born with a perfect idea of yourself, whole, capable, worthy. Then the world began to tell you otherwise and you adjusted. You shrank. You learned to doubt. But the truth never left you. It waits for your permission to re-emerge. And the moment you decide to see yourself differently, not someday but now, you begin to shift the direction of your entire life. Your destiny is not fixed. It is fluid. It moves with your identity. When you change the way you see yourself, everything must reorganize to match. This is why lasting transformation never starts on the outside. You can change your job, your partner, your location, but if your self-concept remains the same, the new will feel eerily similar to the old. The problems will reappear in different forms because you brought the same inner world with you. True change begins with a new assumption about yourself. You begin to claim, I am already enough. I am already chosen. I am already the version of me that belongs in the life I desire. And then you hold that state, not occasionally, but daily, consistently, until it becomes natural, until it feels like truth. You do not have to wait for evidence to change your concept of self. You change it first, and the evidence follows. This is the path of conscious creation. You are no longer reacting to life. You are leading it. The version of you that holds a powerful self-concept does not need to prove or chase. They embody, they attract, they assume, and their world must respond. Because the self-concept is not just a belief, it is a command. And that command shapes your destiny, whether you are aware of it or not. When you become conscious of this truth, you no longer fear the future. You realize you are the one riding it in every thought, every assumption, every moment you choose who you are.